Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. I'm Shane. Thank you guys so much for joining on this special Power of 8 at 8. How are you doing today, Eileen? Whoops. Oh, I'm so glad I caught that. Now you're unmuted.
I'm doing great. I'm still doing great.
Well, would you like to introduce our guest this evening?
I would love to. In fact, they were on, I think back in October, if I remember correctly. It's Gail and Gregory Hoag, and I met them when I did the David Wilcock Into the Portal conference and did the Haunted Stanley Hotel tour with my sister, just the two of us snapping pictures of, you know, rods and photons and all these things around the hotel. And I went into their shop the next day because I met Gregory at the conference talking about sacred geometry, and I love sacred geometry. I never say his name right, but I've read both of his books, and I did his video course, 36 videos on Gaia TV, and it's Drunvalo Melchizedek. Am I saying it right? And I went to their store, and the energy inside it, Metaforms in Lyons, Colorado, they can correct me, had so much energy in it that half my family could stay in the store and half of my family had to go stand outside because they had forms spinning everywhere. So I literally sat down in a chair under every single form before picking mine out, and I brought home Metatron's cube.
I love that.
And Gail walked in and she's like, you know, I usually don't come in, and it was the end of the day, and she just kind of knew that we were in there. And then I got this chakra wand that 2 weeks ago when I spoke the meditation through it, that's when I disappeared. On the word energy, I just went off into the ethers. So
I see the golden ratio on there. I love that one.
Yeah, the golden ratio. They'll talk about these, but I've got them here. So no more ado. Where are Gregory and Gail? There you are.
I hope we're here. Are we here?
You're here. Now tell me if I missed anything. I've missed a lot because you've been experts in sacred geometry for decades and decades, and you trained or worked with Drunvalo. Am I saying his name right?
It's Drunvalo Melchizedek. You're right. I actually knew him before he was Drunvalo. But what I did with Drunvalo was make a lot of the geometries for him because I understood sacred geometry and how it came together. And there were times where he would say, oh, there's a new way of the energy going around the planet. And I said, I know, I've been making it for the last couple months. I'll send you the Unity Grid. And that was back in the late 80s, I think, when we were doing that.
And that's the second one down because I have the Unity Grid in my living room, and above it I have the stellated Earth star spinning on the other side in my bedroom.
The interesting thing about the Unity Grid is that each face, each triangular face, is exactly the same as the face of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Exactly the same angles.
How do they do that? Is that based on the total space of the front of the pyramid and then you divide it up into the triangles?
No, when you look at the face of the Great Pyramid at Giza and you look at that triangular face, the angles of that face, the top and the two bottom sides, the top is actually close to 64 and the two bottom angles are close to 58. And you know the way the pyramid is actually indented in on each face?
Mm-hmm.
No,
and And
There's
when
really 8 faces on it, isn't it?
correct.
Right.
And when you have 8 faces on it, the tops of those pyramids break into 8 32-degree angles. So that's one of the aspects. At the beginning, Shane said there are 32 people on. I said, "Oh, that's my favorite number."
Oh yeah.
That's just part of maybe 5%, 1% of why that's my favorite number. But it shows up all over the place throughout the universe. It's basically part of what's created everything living. So,
Nice.
but anyway.
Well, on that, numerologically, I have 9 5s in my name, and 32 is 5. And I had somebody on YouTube called Livette, who is wonderful. She does alchemical, ancient astrology. Not, she takes into account the, how things have moved over the past 2,000 years. And she said the 5s, and well, she wasn't talking particularly about the 5. She said, in my chart, I have the earth. I have the earth power. I have the earth energy. And when I did my numerology back in the day in the 1980s, because I had 9 5s in my name, it was all about earth. It was all about earth energy as opposed to fire, water, and what's the other one? Air, I think.
Mhm.
Air.
And Gregory, you were saying that when we were talking, I wanted to get the unity grid because it's round for me. That's why I wanted it. I wanted something to go with my square Metatron's cube and with my stellated earth grid. And you said it's based on the pyramid, but that pyramids are no longer putting out the energy that they did when they were first built. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how pyramids have changed?
Basically, they don't serve humanity in our spiritual evolution at the moment. And a lot of the reasons for the pyramids were more in alignment with certain extraterrestrial beings. I mean, the reason that you find Orion's belt being duplicated on the ground with the pyramids at Giza is there is a relationship of sending energy via the pyramids to Orion. And, time and distance are not viable constraints in 4th, 5th dimensional dynamics. And so that's what they're working with. And a lot of the Orion beings, extraterrestrials, are not positively oriented. And what my guidance and our guidance, Gail's and mine, has been telling us from the beginning is that pyramids are not serving the spiritual evolution of human beings. And I talked to you the other day about the Ra material and that channeling. And in there, Ra very explicitly says pyramids are not viable for human beings anymore. And he spoke of working with spherical geometries like the unity grid, and that those had to be worked with very carefully. If you go into ancient Vedic scripture, you'll find that they say something about the altar to a spiritual altar has 10,800 bricks. And they also have in the Rig Veda 10,800 different paragraphs or stanzas. And the reason that 10,800 shows up. If we take numbers like that and translate it into geometry by making it degrees, 10,800 degrees is the exact number of degrees in adding up all the face angles of the unity grid. So there's something very curious about that. And you also find in the stellated icosahedron and dodecahedron that you have, that also has 10,800 degrees. And so, you know, there are ways that information gets hidden in ancient texts. And I think you mentioned the other day, Eileen, that you wanted to talk about where does sacred geometry come from?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, bottom line, it's like source, creation, works with, I have a fairly nice little diagram right here that everyone can see. It's like source resonates with the physical through number, pattern, frequency, cycle, and time. And that is really what sacred geometry, our space-time continuum, is made up of. And so everything from the beginning of time, the way source in the entire universe, the way this universe was created, it follows these patterns, rhythms, cycles. And so what happens is that in ancient times on this planet, pre-Diluvian times, I mean, we're talking about before the Great Flood. And at that time, the Atlanteans that existed on this planet, about 12,500 years ago, there was major comet fractures that came down and went into the ice caps that were about 2 miles thick over North America. And what happened was it started the whole process of the Younger Dryas, which was a period of a couple thousand years, 1,600 years, where things got colder for a while. And then as they started to warm up, we ran into that comet tail again, and that really finished off the destruction of those cultures. And those cultures, the Atlantean cultures, went out into the world, and you see the same geometries show up in Vedic scripture in Asia, all through the Sumerians, all through the Egyptian cultures that really started over 9,000 years ago, and the Mayan cultures. They all work with the same numbers. They all work with the same geometries. And that's because it went back to the same source with the Atlanteans, and they were fed a lot of the extraordinary numbers and understandings by extraterrestrial beings tens of thousands of years ago.
Fascinating that you've brought this up, because Shane sent me a great video series that showed the changes around us in the solar system, tying in with the changes in consciousness and the change in the polar magnetic north and the scattered magnetic shield. And then I read the Kali Yugas, which many people may not be familiar with unless they've studied Hinduism. And what you're talking about, these Atlantean times and the tail of the comet, and the Thunderbolts project, talking about Venus being a comet that was trapped into kind of our sun's elliptical orbit. It's all tying together for me when you say these things. I think we really are going through something now which is showing in consciousness, but you're linking it back to sacred geometry. And for many people, it's they start with the Platonic solids, the triangle, the circle, the square, right? It's 5 basic shapes, am I right?
Yes, we have 5 subplatonic solids. And what you're talking about too is we are moving into a special part of the galaxy where the sun's energetic field, which far supersedes the solar system. It's moving into a field that was basically brought to everyone's attention in '98 by a scientist, Dr. Dimitrov. And what he found is that this particular energetic field is dozens and dozens of light years across, and that it is very high magnetism and it is a very high temperature. And what's happening is, as we're entering that field, it's affecting all the planets of the solar system and affecting them in the way that we would say is global warming, because all the planets are exhibiting a much higher temperature and a much more radiance, much more reflectivity. That's because the sun is picking up on this energy, sending it out to the planets, and human beings, our energetic field is being affected by all of this as we're taking it in, and we're going through that transformation. The interesting thing is that when you're working with energy of this nature, it has a tendency to force what already is. And what I mean by that is, if you are working on being conscious, if you are working on being a loving, present human being, that you're going to find you're supported in that pathway. If you're caught up in fear, if you're caught up in all the negative emotions or lack and negativity, you're going to be forced in that direction. That's the nature of the energy that we're moving into right now. It's forcing us into almost a bifurcation of humanity, being forced into the extremes. So it's so important that we stay centered at this time in creation.
How can sacred geometry help us? I know we lost Shane. I know you're there, Shane, but you've cut your video because you're the stream. You're trying to keep us clear, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to, because you guys are coming through kind of on and off. So,
dear me, pop in anytime.
It's okay. They can see me.
Hog it.
You guys just can't see me. But I think, it's amazing to me that all of this ties in together with things like cymatics and just all of this stuff seems to be connected. Do you guys, I guess I can go to either one of you guys, Gail or Gregory, about the cymatics and how this ties in, because I've seen these patterns appear when they have the, the sand on the plate and it's vibrating, and it, at these certain hertz, they say these things are all connected. How does that tie in with sacred geometry?
It's like, bottom line, everything ties into sacred geometry. Everything. There's nothing in existence, also nothing in time, that can't be understood through sacred geometric principles. Cymatics, so what Hans Jenny was doing was he was taking oil and water, lycopodium powder, and sprinkling it on plates and then putting frequencies through those plates, and it would form a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, as the frequencies that he put into those plates changed, the patterns would change. And I've actually, in my slideshow, got some pictures of cymatic images later on. But something that excuse me, is really important to understand is that when you look at the cymatic pattern, what you see is not the energy, that's the result of where the energy isn't. It's like if you imagine you have a room that you never clean, and you walk through it all the time. After a while, all the dust bunnies are going to go into the corner, and there'll be a pathway, a clean pathway going through that room where you've been walking. That's because that's where the energy goes. And so it's
so when we see the sand resting, it's actually kind of moving to the area that the vibration isn't, is what you're saying.
The energy isn't.
That makes sense.
And so it's kind of, it's the lack of energy. But the curious thing that human beings really need to start to understand is that what we do is we look at things and try to interpret from the things we're looking at. But if you understand that all things are made up of energy, 99.99999%, that's 5 nines after the decimal point, and only 0.00001% is actually physical matter. Actually, you know, the electrons, the protons, the neutrons, the physical stuff is that small. You know, everything we have to understand is really energetic. So it's like we need to start to move to higher understandings of the way energy works. So cymatics, coming back to that, it's a good metaphor to understand that our tendency is to look at the pattern, but the pattern is not the essence of what's going on. It's in between the pattern, the energy in between the pattern. And often when you're working with music, it's the intervals, the space within the music. The importance of the octave is not the 8 notes of the octave, but the 7 spaces between the octave and the way that they play off each other. And so, bottom line.
Well, you know, it's a whole different take of recognizing that when we say everything is energy, before there's matter, before any kind of form comes into place, everything is pure energy and it's formless. And that's where it also integrates with consciousness. And in quantum physics, we talk about how wherever our focus as our consciousness goes, then, and people think it's magic, but that's really the way things work, that activates the energy to go into some kind of a structural function to create form. But because we're so fixated on form, we keep looking at the form instead of recognizing this pure vibrational field that is so vast and can be anything at all. And when we start working from a multidimensional level and realizing that what we see, what we can feel with our physical senses, what we can hear with our ears, you know, all of those kinds of things are just a fragment of what's really there. However, what sacred geometry is, why it's so important, is because in order for anything to manifest, there are some basic structural integrities that are followed in everything out there. And they show up in these different kinds of geometries, in rhythms, in the frequencies, in patterns, in number. That's kind of like telling us the story of how we go from pure energy into matter. But honestly, you know, the more we expand our awareness to realize, like what Gregory was just talking about, it's what's in the spaces between. That's where, you know, the energy really is. It's in, you know, what we consider the void. The void is so rich and full and extraordinary.
Definitely. This almost ties into how we're like in between. You know, there's all this talk about going from 3D to 4D to 5D and sort of this expansion of human consciousness. But really, when you think of those are really like the thresholds, and it's like we really just hang out in between most of the time anyway, right? It's like, you know, the threshold of a doorway moving up into a higher density or vibration, if you will.
something I was sharing with Eileen the other day was that in the raw material, they talk about densities.
Mhm.
And so a second density being would be a plant or an animal. And we're third density beings right now. And what that means is we're at a certain level of consciousness in the way we work. And yet we also exist in the third dimension. And so they're a little bit different, or they're quite a bit different. Density is a measure of consciousness, and dimension is a measure of what we're working with in our environment. So we can be in the third dimension. We can also work with fourth dimensional aspects. And that's what the emotional body is like. And when people see an aura around someone, they're working with the fourth dimension. If they're starting to work with time and space, they can move into the fifth dimension and even up into sixth and seventh dimensional realities. And there are beings that exist on those other dimensional realities and yet still interact with our third dimension, and they may or may not be third density beings, fourth density beings, fifth density beings in terms of consciousness. So it's almost like there is just an infinite amount to explore. But I think it's important for us to expand beyond just this limited third dimensional understanding and start to expand into the full dimensionality of who we are as human beings, so we can grow spiritually and move on into higher dimensional realities in terms of higher density. And so in the end, it really comes back to keeping things simple and just working with your heart space and moving into the higher aspects of your being, the higher dimensional aspects that you can enter into through your heart, and work with love and work with that joy and work with that happiness that you know you are. And when you're touching those elements in your life, you know you're touching what is important. You're touching what's really real. And I wanted to go to what you were talking about, the platonic solids. It's like when you have one thing, like this tennis ball, a single point, and then when you bring in another, you have a line between those 2 points. When you bring in a third element, what happens is you have then a plane. You have, how can I show you that? There we go. You have a plane, 3 elements. When you add a fourth element, then you get a little pyramid. And that's moving into physical matter for the first time, because then you have a dimension. And that's the tetrahedron. It's the first form created out of 4 elements. And yet, if I were to drop this, it would always land on one face and it would always have the other point up. No matter how I dropped it, it would land like that. And what universe likes is balance, is symmetry. And so what it does is it forms another tetrahedron through here. So one pointing up and one pointing down. And that's the star tetrahedron that was referred to by Drunvalo as a Merkabah, because it is the simplest vehicle around the outside of a human being, and it's the first balanced form that's created. But I think when I go, let's see, I wanted to go in here These are some of the ways that sacred geometry has been used by ancients in the past, working with, of course, Stonehenge, the pyramids, all based on sacred geometric principles. Stonehenge actually based on the exact diameter of the planet. Like, how did they know back thousands of years BC what the diameter of the planet was? But the Roman architecture, the Greek architecture, following very strict patterns of geometric proportion in order to create resonance, because it's through resonance that we can access source, we can access the higher dimensional realities.
I've always felt from following certain people like Graham Hancock that, and growing up in Egypt and knowing that the Sphinx was much older than they were saying it was, like 12 to 15,000 years. Now people are saying 25 to 35,000 years. And at the time in the 70s and 80s, when I lived there, they said it was like 2,500, 3,000 years BC. And I really feel that we had some very, very clever, advanced technological societies that have risen and fallen, just like in our current history, Egypt, Rome, Greece have all, reached their pinnacle and then they're gone. I think we've had incredibly technologically advanced civilizations here on this planet before. And that kind of ties in again with the Kali Yugas, which say that civilizations rise and fall every 3,000 years, every 13,000 years, and every 26,000 years. Have you come across that kind of information as well? And that we're kind of going into a rise and fall now, consciousness rising, and current greedy, materialistic society falling?
Yes. It's like, that's what I was speaking to a moment ago when I was talking about the Atlanteans, when their civilization was totally destroyed. I mean, it makes sense that there were many that survived that went out into the world, and there were many human beings that were at a hunter-gatherer stage. And so all of a sudden, you see about 9,600 years ago, grains were introduced. And it's like, where did those grains come from? Many of them have been shown, proven today to not have any kind of genetic correlation to wild grasses and so forth. So how did all of a sudden husbandry happen? All of a sudden these domesticated animals. And there were timelines like the 26,000 years. It's actually 25,920 years precisely. And I can show you later on what that is about. For example, the 25,920 year cycle, that has to do with the precession of the equinoxes. And there are some scientists that say that's because the equator bulges and thus the pole of the planet is going through a wobble. And that's why there's a precession. And what precession means is that when you are looking at the heavens, you are moving through the 12 signs of the zodiac, and it takes 2,160 years, excuse me, for each sign of the zodiac, the way we're moving. Now, there's another man, Walter Cruttenden, who said that he believed and showed really compelling evidence that we were not doing a wobble thing with our axis, but actually orbiting another star as well as our star. And it makes sense when you think about 80% of all stars in the universe that have been observed are binary. And so there is a matter of thought that says Sirius and Sirius B are also part of our orbiting cycle, and that we are linked to them, and that's part of the precession. I think it's too exact of a period of time, as I can show you later, and that really, I believe that there's an extraterrestrial influence that is causing us to move in this kind of a periodicity, where, as you can see right now, I've got on the screen a square, a pentagon, a hexagon. If you look at the degrees of a square, 360 degrees times 72 equals the great year. That is 25,920 years, divides equally by the square, by the pentagon, by the hexagon, and you see octagon, tetrahedron, cube, all the platonic solids divide evenly into 25,920 years. And in the bottom section, you see stellated dodecahedron is the 10,800 degrees as the stellated icosahedron, the unity grid. But another very interesting dynamic is that when you look at the numbers that show up, all of these numbers, the 36, 72, 54, 108, you see these same numbers again and again and again. And you'll go into temples that were built with 108 pillars, or you'll go into all the mala beads that different Eastern religions work with, 108 beads. The Catholic Church uses 54 beads. Why do they constantly work with all these numbers? And you look down in the lower right-hand corner and you see there is a pentagon. And if you look at that pentagon, the angles that are in it are 36 degrees, 54 degrees, 72 degrees, 108 degrees. These angles show up again and again in all the sacred geometry because these angles relate to DNA, relate to all life, relate to the way creation happens. Creation happens around these angles. See, there are only two triangles in creation where the long side divided by the short side is equal to the phi ratio. And the phi ratio shows up throughout the way insects are created, plants are created, human beings, DNA. Everything shows up working with these same numbers. The universe is set up to create life around these particular numbers. And it works with the geometries, the platonic solids, the square, the tetrahedron, all of them. And it works with it works with every aspect of creation. And Mayan time, they worked with a 360-day cycle, as did the Egyptians, as their year. And in Mayans, it was like that equals one tune times 20 equals a katun, which is 7,200 days. So you see 36 degrees, 72 degrees again shows up. And a baktun 144, which is the addition of the two base angles of that. So you keep seeing that again and again. 72, these are just some of the things where you see 72 Earth years equals 1 degree of the great year, which is 25,920. If you take the amount of time that one period of each of the planets is in, like when we're moving into Aquarius, will last 2,160 years. That is also the number of degrees in a cube, our basic standard of measure. It's also the diameter exactly of the moon in miles, which is, I mean, there are sacred units that the miles are constructed of, and the miles on the Earth, but that's why the moon is constructed perfectly. In truth, it is a construct. I believe it was brought in not all that long ago, tens of thousands of years ago within human history. But 72, you can take that times 30, and that will give you the moon's diameter. It will give you the Earth's diameter in miles. It will give you, so, you know, this is what you can work with some of these numbers that are so perfect in the way the creation is set up around us. It's mind-boggling. So,
Yeah, we saw the vortex math in there, didn't we, Shane? That's 2 days of math shows, isn't it?
yeah, vortex math comes back down to the geometry. And when we were talking about the star tetrahedron, when you connect the outside points of it, you get a cube. And when you connect the inside points of it, you have an octahedron. And the three geometries together create something that we call Metatron's cube. This has been known to people in a two-dimensional format for thousands of years, but this is the way. I mean, you go on the internet, you only see this perspective, you know, where you have one six-pointed star within another six-pointed star, and people call that Metatron's cube. But cube references something three-dimensional, and a two-dimensional object does not exist in this dimension. It, like on a piece of paper, you could draw anything you want. A flower of life, a Sri Yantra, Metatron's cube. But when you pick that piece of paper up and you turn it sideways, it disappears. It doesn't exist here. It has no stuff here, no energy here. Any energy it seems to have, you bring to the table, you bring to it. You're infusing it with your belief systems. You're infusing it with what you expect to have happen. It's when you're working with actual three-dimensional forms, like a three-dimensional Metatron's cube, that you have something that has the capability of interacting with the energetic fields around you more profoundly, thus creating a more profound energetic shift.
Okay, so I've got one, and you've given me, I bought a spinner. I bought a ceiling spinner, and I bought a tabletop spinner that's got a little more oomph and energy coming out of it. And when my Metatron's cube is spinning, I noticed it goes clockwise, right, on the tabletop?
Correct.
What does that do? What does that do to the energy around me, the energy through the meditations that we're doing when we connect with 100 people live? What does that do?
Clockwise is basically bringing energy in. When you go over someone, and it's important to understand that what determines clockwise is viewing it from the outside in. When you originally clockwise happened because people put a stake in the ground, and as the sun moved across from the east to the west, that stake shadow moved around it in a way that was clockwise. And so that's how they made clocks go, just like the shadow of the stake with the sun, with the original sundial. They kept the format. So clockwise is bringing energy into the system and looking at it from outside in, from God's perspective toward the earth. And when you move it in the opposite direction, counterclockwise, that is pulling energy out, that is clarifying, that is moving energy out into the universe.
And how do we determine the clockwise? Is it, if it's above you, it's from looking up, or is it from looking down?
It's from looking down, God's position, the higher position, the position outside of the system. You are a system, and then outside of the system. So if Shane is working on you and he's moving his hand in a clockwise way according to what Shane is seeing, what you're going to be seeing from your perspective is looking like it's counterclockwise. Just like when we look up at all the stars and the planets up there, they're moving opposite to what they, from our perspective, because we put ourselves as the most important perspective and say, oh, they're moving relative to me. But you have to think of yourself as a closed system, and that's coming into the system. So you got to look at it from outside of yourself. Another reason to move to a higher dimensional perspective of yourself in order to truly understand what's going on in this dimension.
And what kind of energies does this bring in when it's spinning?
The Metatron's cube,
Mm-hmm.
because everything in creation, you'll find the way the photon is created is looking like, now they've shown a star tetrahedron, and that the cube shows up in the way space has defined cube limits, and the octahedron universes present themselves octahedrally. The way they move through the universe, galaxies form around octahedral shapes. So bottom line, this is very much involved with physical grounding, with matter, with putting order into space. And so what it's doing is it's helping you show up here, and it's helping organize the space in a perfected way. It's helping you to work out your dharma, your order, your manifestation of creation, and it brings things into balance within your environment and within your physical body. And yes.
Well, something that I think is really important with three-dimensional sacred geometry is that it helps connect us to the higher dimensions. Just like what Gregory was explaining, we're so oriented towards 2D living, really. When we look at things on a flat plane, we get our information from books. We do things from, a perspective where we're not bringing in all of the different multi-dimensions. And that is a very important part of where we are right, traveling in the galaxy closer to these new attractions and the energies. Yeah, these energetic clouds that are, they are having an effect on us. And so it is very important for us to be able to expand into a multidimensional access, awareness, consciousness. And so all of these geometries are supporting these connections, the connections to the greater aspects of who you are. So we can get beyond just this physical dimension, the material world. We talked about earlier at the beginning of this talk, that there's this polarity that's going on right now. And, some of what we see is there's one side that really wants to hold on to what physically controls this culture, this life, this material life, monetary wealth, all of that. And then you look at people, and a lot of young people who are really powerful now and are recognizing that their real power is coming from consciousness. It's coming from compassion. It's coming from living in a connected and heartful way. And all of these sacred geometries that are three-dimensional support us in expanding into those dimensions of who we are. And, that takes us into being able to remember who we really are. As we've evolved through different high-level civilizations, some civilizations were quite amazing with how spiritually aligned they were, how they understood things that, we go, wow, how do they know that? Well, they used higher intelligence, whether it was connecting with higher dimensional beings or space beings or just knowing, whatever those applications were, that is part of who we are. And in order to get beyond this, this material world and reach into higher access into what we can consciously create, three-dimensional sacred geometry is a conduit. It's like an antenna system that supports us in these connections. And not only does it support us in those connections to higher dimensions, but it also serves to strengthen us so that we're not tossed and turned by some of the, the stress that's out there in the world. Whether it's electronics, whether it's toxins in our environment, whether it's fear, judgment, all kinds of things that many people are suffering from. When we connect into the higher dimensional aspects of who we are, it's like the eagle flies way up high and circles around, but still has pristine vision to be able to understand the details, to be able to go right to where it needs to be. And so that is part of this training time, I believe, that we're in. And because, sacred geometry is mimicking the way that energy comes into matter, it aligns us with those aspects of who we are, that our soul is, so we can expand into these higher realities.
Moment of silence.
I can say, we can all say more.
I know, we're all like zoning, and like I can feel the Om energy around all of this information.
Yeah,
Well,
I really like the topic itself. Fascinating, really.
Yeah, it is. It's like when you two talk about it, I can see it and I understand it. And then when I try to share the information with someone, I'm like, God, how do you explain sacred geometry? You guys make it easy.
well, good. Because it really is just a step-by-step understanding that can be really integrated in very common sense ways and worked with. And that's what we've done with all the tools, the pendants that we make and so forth. We've been working with sacred geometry now as a business for over 33 years. And
just quickly, they're in the links, in the show description links. Shane has put down your website, your YouTube site for meditations with sacred geometry, your radio talk show site, so people can go online and take a look at the forms, the jewelry. I mean, I always wear my sacred geometry for the live meditations.
And you feel the energy of it. correct?
Oh, definitely. Like a couple of weeks ago, I tried to do a meditation as Gail had suggested. Thank you, Gail, through the chakra wand. And it could be because I'm changing Wi-Fi into, experimenting with different Wi-Fi. But as soon as I said the word energy towards the end of the meditation, with about 100 people joined together, poof, I was gone. It was like this amplified the energy so much so that I got disconnected.
Okay.
Sometimes our electronics have a hard time handling all of this.
Yes, it's like we are more powerful than the electronic platforms that we're on.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's important. That's a really important point, because sometimes people get overwhelmed with 5G coming up, the plethora of information, artificial intelligence, all of those things. And really, when we really get down into who we are, what consciousness is, the expression of the soul, it is so far beyond all these other things that, are great to play around with here in this, in this third dimension. But on the higher dimensions, hey, they're just child's play. Nothing compared to
Drop the fear,
what we can
basically,
do.
instead of feeling afraid of the chemtrails and the 5G, and you mentioned a few other things. Instead of feeling like these powerful energies that humans have created can hurt us, we drop the fear and stand in our own power, which is consciousness, which
Exactly.
far exceeds anything, including AI, that humans could ever invent.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. AI is a third dimensional phenomena. That means that as you move into these higher dimensional realities, AI isn't there. A lot of the negative extraterrestrial things and fourth dimensional difficulties that people see with archonic energy, it doesn't exist on the higher dimensional levels, which is where we are really destined to expand to, so that we can grow in consciousness through higher densities as well as higher dimensions.
Then can I ask you quickly, Gail and Gregory, do you think that if people can't cope with the 3D issues, they can't go up to the fourth density, the fifth density, the sixth? Do they have to master this plane first? Or if they're good, kind, loving people, they get to go? Even if they can't cope with the challenges here.
You just contradicted yourself a little bit. I mean, good, conscious, loving people have meant and truly, integrated those challenges and moved beyond them. That's what I was saying earlier about the energies that are coming into our planet right now, that energy wants to flow through us. And if we have issues, those issues are having pressure against them. So we need to deal with them. We need to learn from them. I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, it's all a play. Who cares if we have AI or extraterrestrials or good guys or bad guys or this kind of president or that kind of political system, or you believe all the stuff behind it? It doesn't make any difference. It's all an illusory play. You're here to learn and grow. You're here to interact with this reality, how you need personally to work it out, to work out your issues and move beyond them, so that you can be in that space of love, be in that space of consciousness.
Well, there's another piece too that I want to address, and that is that the way that we've been educated, there's this sense of like either you do it right or you do it wrong. And there's, someone that I was very influenced by, Buckminster Fuller. He would say, people think that I was just a really smart person. He said, but really, I just made more mistakes than other people. Mm-hmm. And what that says is that we are evolving. When we stop judging ourselves and other people, and we instead learn what's there, learn from all of the different aspects that we're creating, recognizing ourselves in an evolutionary flow, then, you know, we don't have to be these perfected people that come to the, you know, the gates of St. Peter and find out whether you're going to go to heaven or hell. You know, that mindset is very two-dimensional. And so instead, you know, yes, it's important to keep opening our heart, because honestly, we can trust our heart more than we can trust a lot of other stuff, because our mind can play games with us. Our mind is really just capturing historically what's happened. If you really want to talk about, you know, what's, you know, in your heart, that's where you can be creative. That's where you know, you can really connect into the higher range of who you are. That's where compassion is an enormous quality. You know, when we talk about love, that's an amazing quality. It's way beyond what the brain knows how to do, knows how to work with. And so if we just keep on that evolutionary track and know that that's the expression that we want, we don't need to be these, you know, perfectly, you know, created beings, you know, who have done the right meditations and gone to the right programs and followed the right, you know, whatever. Instead, stay with your heart, grow in that space of love, grow in that place of being able to express more compassion and dignity and integrity in your life. And that's really what sends us into, you know, being able to connect in with all these other higher levels of being.
And your heart, you know, is not, it's not like some people seem to think that because the heart has some cells similar to brain cells, that the heart is capable of taking over the brain and sending information to the brain from the heart. It's really to be understood that the heart is a doorway, and it's got enough cells similar to the brain to communicate to the brain what is coming through the heart, because that's your higher self. The higher aspects of your being, the higher dimensional aspects that we're talking about right now, that you are, I mean, you're like an iceberg where only 10% shows up here in the physical. The other 90% exists on these higher dimensional levels already. And it connects to your physical body through your heart center and goes to your brain to control the brain and have it follow, you know, be the computer it's meant to be and do the things it wants it to. And so that's why you need to put your higher self in charge. And another way of saying it is, you know, trust what's coming through your heart and work with culturing that higher aspect of your being to communicate to this physical body, so that your higher self is running this personality rather than the other way around. Because the personality can shut out higher self. All it has to do is get into any negative emotion, get into any judgment, get around. Now, sadly enough, a lot of toxins also block that flow. A lot of EMFs, the electricity, the things going on with the computers and the cell phones, those energies block that flow of energy from higher self from coming into our environment. And that's why we're building the things we're building, because these tools help that connection, help people stay in resonance with their higher self so that they aren't, you know, separate and feel alone and feel overwhelmed by the stress and the negativity of this dimension. You need to be in this dimension, but not of this dimension. And so that's the nature of these tools, is bringing through resonance, like a C tuning fork resonating with a C tone. It's going to, because of the geometries we work with, resonate with higher aspects of self.
And I think another thing that we should probably mention is, how much baggage do we carry around that holds us back from, teacher, preacher, minister, parent, things like that we carry around, and how much that blocks us from connecting to our higher self too. So, and on top of all these environmental factors you're talking about. So I'd be sort of, remiss not to mention that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's what we were talking about earlier when I was talking about blockages
Yeah.
within the body. When you have a belief system, a blockage, a difficulty that you've come here to work on and you haven't really dealt with it,
Yeah.
and the energy that's wanting to come through now is putting more pressure on it than sometimes we can bear. And so it's causing us to go crazy. We need to work with it to allow the energy to flow. And Shane, when you were talking about these concepts of who we think we think we're all these things. We think we're a human being or a man or a woman or a child or, we're a fireman or whatever. And it's like, that's not who we are. And what we're here to do is not all these things like fireman, teacher, cook, but it's like really we need to almost look at it from the perspective of what are we? We are energetic beings inside a physical envelope, and we need to learn the lesson of love and how we express more love, how we can be of service to others, and through that be able to grow into the bigger dimensional aspects of ourself and ultimately be able to progress spiritually through these different densities.
Nice.
Absolutely.
I love it when people say we are tiny pieces of the spiritual universe experiencing itself through physicality. I just love that. I love the Aboriginal dream time. I love the Native American respect and connection to all things, whether it's a human being, an animal, a mineral, a plant. I love that feeling of being the spiritual aspect of the universe experiencing itself here, now, in 3D.
Yeah. Then we're connected. That's what's so beautiful is you're talking about that, we come into these bodies, we're birthed, and all of a sudden, we've been these incredible souls who come into a body and go, whoa, I'm feeling pretty darn isolated here. What's going on? And what a journey with all the different imprints and experiences to regain ourselves, to find each other, and also to be able to embrace all of the people who have taught us things that might be counter to what we really know at the higher level of our being. But resistance is what builds us. If you want to train your muscles, you're going to work with weights. You're going to do something to create resistance so that you build those muscles. So we could look at those experiences of our, some of the teachers and the religious experiences that we've had, the experiences in, our world in, as employees, relationships, all of that, as dramatizing the aspects that we've come here to reveal, to learn, to turn it, to polish the facets of the diamond so that we really can connect into a deeper level. We can, come back to that higher knowing. And, I always find it very interesting that there are certain people who maybe they avoided things. I remember, like with my father, it was hard for him to create, really open-hearted relationships to express himself that way. Instead, he dealt with a lot of anger in the way that he spoke. And as he aged, and he was moving towards his death, what I saw was that he didn't have the same physical energy anymore. And what happened was, all of a sudden, he was able to reach into those communications through his heart. He spoke differently. He saw things differently. And so, we get what we need in a lot of different ways to evolve and to be able to move on to the higher aspects of who we are.
My mother was the same. She was an artist and a singer and played piano. And she was very angry with people because people didn't always agree with her. And she isolated herself and she took herself away from people, which was great for her artwork because, she flourished as an artist, but she couldn't interact with people. And as she aged and became less physically able, she became more loving and more heart-centered and more forgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's such a beautiful cycle that, and the thing that I think is so important is that as we are younger, we don't have to wait until we don't have the energy anymore. There's so much that we're able to reach out and connect in with each other so that we can have that rich relationship, that real compassion and love expressed in our life at all different levels. We don't have to go through some kind of experience of being knocked down at our, a level energetically or physically to get there. And then we keep, I look at the younger generation now and I think, wow, they're aware of things that took me years and years and years to get to. They are just way ahead of us. And what we'll be able to reach is extraordinary. It's quite beautiful to see.
That is amazing. And it's also liberating that, you can get together with people and you don't have to agree on every single element. You realize that's sort of a secondary issue and that love is the primary thing. And you can release judgment. And being raised in religion, I had a lot of that judgment that you feel like it's your responsibility to tell someone how they should live or whatever, and it's so liberating to let that go and realize that, ultimately I can be there, I can love others, I can be there for them if they need somebody, but ultimately I don't have to convince anybody of anything. I've just got to work on myself, and how I treat others. And really that's my only job. And to let go of all that other stuff really is freeing on a level that I'd never imagined when I was deep in religion,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So here's another one of the Platonic solids, the dodec. We named the first three that show up in Metatron's cube, and then the last two are the dodecahedron and the icosahedron. And these two have a dance that is remarkable. And remember when we were talking about 32? Well, this has 20 faces, this has 12 faces. Together that makes 32. And they go through an amazing dance to create the stellated icosa and the stellated dodeca, which has 10,800 degrees, back to our 10,800 number. And this is the way they interact together I've got the dodecahedron going through the icosahedron. And what happens is when you look at one of these crosses, this is a cross that when you connect the points at the ends of the cross and drop out the other number or the other lines, you're going to get the unity grid again. And you're going to have the triangles that you find on the face of the pyramid at Giza. So this shows up when you take that cross and make a rectangle out of it with this width and this length, and you put a diagonal through it, it creates again an angle of 32 degrees. So the phi ratio shows up with the way these two dance together, the way the human being is created. So working with these kinds of geometries, what happens is it creates all of the resonance with the way we're created. So we can really start, here is a dodecahedron with points on it. This is the star dodecahedron I was talking about that
Beautiful.
has 10,800 degrees if you add up all the degrees on each face. So these are things that we work with in the chamber, on a couple of chambers on our land. When we're done making the pendants, we put them for a night through the pyramid, or the geometries. In the one on your lower left, there's a tube there with frequencies, geometry spinning in it. The one on the lower right, a tube goes over that, and that has a whole number of forms spinning on the same motor that you're working with in the Metatron's cube. And the reason that adds more energy to the form when it spins is it spins at a very particular speed, and it has a frequency in the megahertz range that is being pumped through the surface of the motor. So there's a number of things going on to add more energy to them as they are spinning. And where our chambers are located, we work with the grid of the planet. And the grid that you're looking at there, again, is the icosahedron and the dodecahedron interpenetrating each other. So it's an icosadodeca grid system on the planet itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's important to understand. And then there are more and more lines that come out from that extend this system. In the Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hurtak, he shows the overlay of the dove. And the interesting thing that we're working with there is that we have placed a Pleiadian vortex at this space in Lake Superior, Minnesota, and that's at the tail of the dove. And our land is in the right wing of the dove, and we have other forms and large tools buried at Mount Ida, working with that in Arkansas, and the serpent mounds in Ohio, which are much older than what they believe again, and I have forms buried behind the major pyramid at Palenque in the Yucatan. And it wasn't until I completed all of this that I realized that I was forming this cross that was very similar to the cross of intelligent infinity, which is what Ra called the cross on the face of the pyramid, which is the cross in the center of the unity grid. If you go from one point to the other, you form this kind of a cross. So
I've seen that laid out before, where they take the cube and then they lay it out onto paper and it forms the cross, right? As you unfold the cube.
You can do that with it's called the cross of matter, because it has 6 sides. You have 2 toward the bottom, and then 1 on each of the top pieces, then 1 in the center, and it looks like that cross when you unfold a cube and lay out each face flat. I put this in, and you were talking about the woven spiral star. this is what you were speaking through when you had that energy overload. And it's kind of fun to see what we've done here, working with some aspects of sacred geometry to make this particular tool. It's like we've taken the star, a 6-pointed star, and 6 is very balancing. That's why it's the symbol that goes over the heart in the heart chakra. And what we've done is woven this, which we first go over, then we go under. So that outside star is woven over and under itself, which helps spin the energy when you work with something that's woven like that. We then have, as Shane was pointing out, that phi ratio spiral in the center formed by making that phi ratio rectangle, putting a square in it, and then a square in the smaller one. And you can see how it forms the spiral, just like the nautilus shell. And so it's working with the energy that way. We've taken, again, forming a 6-pointed star that we weave together with sterling silver, and that's in the center part where we add that. And we have samarium cobalt magnets. Now, what a magnet is made of is very important. Magnets are not understood by scientists at this point. They know it moves something called magnetism. What is magnetism? They haven't really defined it or been able to discover what it is. But my understanding of magnetism, it's the movement of etheric energy on the 4th dimension coming into the 3rd dimension. And when you have a metal like iron, you can magnetize it with a strong electrical current or by rubbing another permanent magnet over it. And what it does, it lines the iron molecules in such a way as to allow 4th dimensional etheric energy to flow through them more easily. And samarium cobalt is particularly life-enhancing energy. And so at each point, we have a samarium cobalt magnet, and we flip them from north to south, depending, and as you go around the points. So they interact together between the magnets. We then work with, it says orthogonal triple clockwise spirals. Orthogonal just means they're at a right angle to the braid that's going around there. And what we've done is we have that braid is made out of 3 wires, because when you work with 3, you can access higher dimensions more easily than you work with just braiding 2. And you don't want to braid 4, 5. 3 is the magic number. 3, the Trinity, is always the access point to everything else. And so that's in a particular length that is working with the length of the sacred cubit, which is working with a light frequency. So then we put in each of those little right angle triple wrapped ends, we put a little natural hematite magnet that, so it's hematite, which is a natural material that's been magnetized, and it has a way of isolating that 6-pointed star of silver so that the energy stays separate. And when you speak through this, it shifts the energy such that it takes it to a higher octave. You can almost hear it. You even hear it on your side. And when you move this over someone, clockwise, you start to bring energy in. You can clear the chakras. You can move it around the body. I mean, you've done that with people where you've moved it around their body and chakras, and kind of combing their body. It feels luscious, like you're getting just this wonderful pat down on an energetic level. It's really fun.
Yeah, it feels like, and I've friends who I've done it with. They can feel it as well. It feels like there's a drawing out, like if you knew what your energy felt like and somebody was just stretching it, just pulling it out a little and releasing it, pulling it and releasing it. It's like when your neck gets a little sore and you put on that machine that stretches it and it takes away all the tension in between the down the little parts of the neck. That's what it feels like when using the chakra wand on the chakras. It's kind of stress relieving, tension relieving.
Absolutely. It's fluffing up your aura. And when you go in back of the scapula and kind of move it up and out, I had a friend that said he called it fluffing up the wings. And it really feels wonderful.
It does. It does feel good. And I had mice as pets, and we gave them an organic diet because all the rodent food on the market had GMO soy and GMO corn, and they were all dying of tumors. So we went and created our own organic mouse food for our pet mice. And as they were aging, I would use the chakra wand on them, and it really made a difference. My mice lived a lot longer than most people's do.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are little, that reminded me of these little vials that some friends of mine are selling now, where they are full, it's oils filled with buckyballs, which are basically, again, a form of icosahedron dodecahedron. It has 32 faces, a buckyball, and when you put that suspended in oil, they collect it from pure carbon. The scientist who was trying to determine, they wanted to okay it as a drug, and so they needed to determine the rate at which it was toxic. And he kept feeding more and more to his rats, trying to get them to die. Instead, they lived
Forever.
Probably 2 or 3 times the average lifespan of all the other lab rats.
So thanks to Jamie, I know all about buckyballs, because years ago when we first connected through Shane, he sent me information on carbon 60, which is the buckyballs from shungite, like shaken into olive oil, pure virgin olive oil. And I was feeding buckyballs to my mice too, because they were really old and they don't live very long. And I got almost double the lifespan out of my mice. And I was not conducting an experiment. These were beloved pets.
Yeah, and they're called C60, but the number of faces are 32. When you connect,
why do we call it C60 then? Carbon 60. What are they doing there?
There are 60 carbon atoms, but the way they link, the links, the lines joining them, there's 32 of them. No, excuse me. There are not 32 lines. There are, when you join all the atoms, you have triangular faces. And those triangular faces add up. Well, triangular faces, and you have some pentagonal faces, and there happen to be 32 of them, because you have 20 triangular faces, just like you have the 20 faces of the icosahedron, and you have the 12 pentagonal faces, like you have the 12 faces of the dodecahedron. So the icosahedron, the dodecahedron, again, that's what shows up in a buckyball, C60. But C60 just means 60 carbon atoms.
And on that note, I'm trying to understand how the human is the 666, that we are the carbon molecules, the stardust in us is 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, is that it? And 6 something about the carbon structure of the human is 666. I don't explain this well. Do you, Shane? Do you know the definition of that?
I could Google the periodic table of elements really fast.
Do you know it, Gregory? Do you know how?
I haven't heard of that aspect of the human being being the 666.
That would be an 18, and that would be a 9, and that would go back to the vortex math. Go back to
It's
what
like,
you're showing us.
even though people worry about, the mark of the beast, 666, it reduces to the same thing as 144 and, so many other numbers. It
At 9.
all comes back to 9 and working with, which is a completion number, and very, very, it's
The magic
highest
number.
it's the highest aspect of the Trinity. The Trinity plus itself is 6, which is the 6-pointed star, and the way everything in this physical universe displays itself, both physically and through time. All aspects of time deal with a form of 6, and all aspects of the physical dimension work with 6. That's why in Metatron's cube, it's often said that it contains all the Platonic solids. It really didn't, except that the perspective they were working with of Metatron's cube was the one that had 2 6-pointed stars, one within the other, and those 6-pointed stars formed hexagons. And hexagons, 6-sided, everything, all geometries that are regular, all the Platonic solids fit within a 6-sided display.
Interesting then. So if you take that to the Trinity and you're going back into the spirit of the human, the physicality of the human, the emotions or the id or the ego of the human, again, we're just always getting back to vortex math, to Tesla math, to, 369. Creation.
Yeah.
And, it works no matter how you slice or dice it. And what I was showing you before, it's like time relates to form. And so, sometimes today we're stuck with 2019, and this is based supposedly on Christ's death. And so there's just nothing there but a 2-dimensional timeline, and it's linear. And yet what the Mayans were working with was they were working with this 25,920 year cycle. And you see how all the geometries work with that, all the planets work with that. And when you start working with time that has that kind of richness, that type of connection, then you start having a much more dynamic relationship between the physical nature, the space, and the time. So the space-time continuum is dynamic and alive, and you can figure out what's happening and what's going to happen. And astrology is an aspect of it, a small aspect of that we find out where the planets are, the way they affect us, and all these different things are relational. And yet, what we were saying about the 2D phenomena of working with linear time now in 2019, it's like that's not relational to anything except perhaps to when Christ died. But if Christ is a living energy that's working with love and consciousness, let's be involved with it right now and find the ways that it can be dynamic. And that's where working with calendars like the Mayan calendar can bring time into a dynamic unfolding rather than a linear thing that really goes out of mind and out of sight, and we don't have any relationship to it. And that's true of so many things we're caught up in today that are like the way we look at energy. It's like a flat wave that goes from over here, small frequencies or long waves, to smaller waves. And then you can say, well, gamma waves are up there. Here's where the light spectrum is. But it's a linear thing, and it's much more dynamic than that. It's not linear. It's multidimensional and three-dimensional.
Another model that we also work with and was an important part of our new chamber is the torus. And the torus, you know, if we really understand the torus, we have to look at it not only as a three-dimensional structure, but really a higher dimensional structure that is moving and working in time and space. You know, and if you don't understand the torus, it kind of looks like a donut, but it moves in and out of itself. So it's constantly evolving, rotating. I don't know whether we have one here.
I'll go get one.
It's the only self-generating energy field, as it's like it's the quasar and the black hole put together, and
Exactly.
as the energy goes out, it goes in, and as it goes out, it goes in. So it's perpetual infinity, indefinitely. And they say we have a toroidal field around us. The Earth does, the universe does, the humans do, animals do.
Right, right. And so, you know, again, you know, instead of thinking of things in these linear planes of, you know, waves and, you know, things that you can chart on a piece of paper, understanding the evolutionary pattern. And it relates to the galaxies, it relates to the evolution of our lives, it really relates to everything.
Yeah.
And it is, I remember I used to do a lot of channeling years ago, and after Bucky Fuller had passed, and he talked about toruses, and another mathematician, geometer that I studied with, Arthur Young, talked a lot about toruses. And I remember one time in a channeling where I was getting, you really, when I look down at you or I look out at you, I see a torus. That is the field, and it's moving, it's kinetic, it's vibrant, it's happening, in a way that is life. It's about life, and so all of our models, if we can just work with our models in a way that help us see dynamic change, even like looking at, if you can tune into the way that this form is rotating, it's quite different to fix your vision on it based on seeing all the different angles and the different perceptions that come off from it. It's so different than seeing a static piece. When you're seeing it in 3 dimensions and in movement, then, whoops, what was that? My water. Then what you're seeing is all the different aspects of what this is. So Gregory just ran downstairs to get a torus. So this is a really fun model.
This is...
I've never seen a model move like that.
Isn't that fun?
And so, now, interestingly, when you look at the side, these rectangles are even. They're regular, and yet as you move it toward the center, it twists and it goes into like a phi ratio spiral as it moves into the center and comes out this side.
So isn't that the Earth's magnetic shield as well? Our field around the Earth is doing that somehow?
This is the way the energy moves around the planet. It's the way the energy moves around us. And this way, each chakra are lots of little toruses all over our body, because this is the way energy moves. That's why energy moves like a spiral. And yet when energy moves like a spiral across your vision, you're going to see it as a wave. But it's really moving in a spiraling fashion. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. So now an interesting thing about a torus it's incredibly stable. It's more stable than any other form. It's like you can blow a smoke ring and it holds together, even though it's made of almost nothing. Because you see, as it's moving, it's rotating counterclockwise on this side in the x-axis. So this is the x-axis. It's moving counterclockwise over here, clockwise over on this side. In the y-axis, it's moving counterclockwise and clockwise. And through the z-axis in the center, it's going in one direction and coming out in the opposite direction. So you have these 6 different movements simultaneous in a single structure, which is why it is so stable and why it is really the way things are moving even down on the atomic level. And so some of what I've heard from my guidance is that every aspect of an atom is like a black hole. The electrons are like toroidal fields bringing energy in from higher dimensions and taking energy out. And so it's a remarkable situation where we're, just constantly disappearing from this reality and coming back into existence in this reality. It's just
now you're explaining the Mandela effect and taking atoms from the potentiality into physicality. That just kind of explains everything.
Yeah, and the chakras. I mean, when you really understand that every chakra is a torus, then you can see how you can continuously heal yourself, refresh yourself, evolve yourself, because that is the model that we've been set to be. We're really, it's really pretty amazing when you think
living forever, that you do live forever, because how can you die if you can never escape the toroidal field of your energy? If you can never escape that, then you live forever, because that has no ending, no beginning and no ending.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
quite profound. Huh?
And
very.
So, I mean, we certainly are feeling very healthy and living much better, all of us. And I think the potential is there. And it's more than just what we're doing physically, but what we're doing emotionally, mentally, and all these levels, and working with these different tools and working with these different geometries, like what we're doing with buckyballs. I mean, that's so much fun that the body takes that geometry and it's literally working with it as a geometry. When they suspend those small carbon C60 atom or molecules in oil, what's happening is it can absorb and capture things within that cage. It works to link with other types of materials very easily and create just a whole aspect of potential for the human being. And the thing is, as long as we work with all these different things in a conscious way, the bigger aspect of ourselves is going to do the right thing with the tool. So it's almost like the pendants that we make. Everybody takes them, has an experience, but everyone has a unique experience because they're going to use it as they need it. And this aspect, the toroidal aspect, we have 9 different toruses in all the pendants that we work with. We make them out of carbon fiber. We make them out of titanium. We work with fiber optic material. We have just the surface itself. We have 2 faces, a back and a front, which with that stainless steel cover creates a torus of energy moving through. And you turn it toward your body in one direction, the energy is going to come in and be more grounding. You flip it over turn it in the other direction, and the energy goes up, and you can feel it move toward your head. It's amazing how you can control the energy just by flipping the geometry.
I find I wear it on the energy going up and out for the meditation, the live meditation that we do. And then for the next couple of days, I have to wear it on the grounding side. Seriously, because I get so tired and energetic at the same time. I feel like that connection with 100 people live to heal the earth, heal the water, clean the air. It has a physical impact, which is quite empowering and energetic, but also tiring. I need to get that downtime and get grounded after connecting with 100 people.
I hear you.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's important, to integrate, to take the time to integrate, to take those breaths and bring it in. That's why we meditate, that's why we connect with the earth, we connect with the higher dimensions. We find that place that we can bring it in to really increase that heart space, that physical quality, everything, all of the
And your
above.
YouTube channel has some great meditations with sacred geometry that our community would love.
Yeah, I invite you to check those out. We have some beautiful ones where you can actually watch spinning geometries, and there's some lovely music behind it, and we lead you through some different processes. And we have some on our audio channel as well, where you don't see the the visuals, but where we do some meditations. So it's very important, rather than, because this is what we've talked about today is a lot of information, and energy is information. It is, and you break down those words, information. It's bringing all of this in to come to another higher structural integrity, and it takes time to ground it, to come into that place of stability, where the evolution can then expand to its next level. So always important to take that time to integrate.
And I think that's a beautiful segue, because it can be powerful, because we've experienced all sorts of things with our group, spontaneous healings and all sorts of things. So I don't really have a topic for tonight, so I'd say just let you wing it, Gail, however you want to, whatever topic you feel is suitable that, for the group, and I think it can be lovely.
Okie doke. So we're going to, I think this is a great way to complete our conversation tonight, and that is to bring together what you've learned. There's a lot that's been circulating, in the ethers and in your head and in your feelings and in your whole energy field. And so let's just all get into a position where you have your feet on the ground, planting your feet on the ground and feeling that relationship to Mother Earth. It's so important. It's what we're here for, is to bring that soul vibration to this physical dimension through this physical structure. So let's feel that groundedness, that ability to touch into Mother Earth. And let's just take a few nice, deep, cleansing breaths to find our center. Bring ourselves into that place of oneness, of expansion into creation, feeling our place in the divine, and feeling that sense of joy that we are here, when it's all said and done, to feel this ecstatic joy called life. Express the divinity in physical form. Take another deep cleansing breath. Release anything that seems to just be more than what you need to deal with right now. Just let it go. Let it go. And with the next breath, let's bring that focus of energy from the head that we've been very much in our heads talking about a lot. And let's bring our awareness into the heart. Breathe through your heart, feeling that wisdom, that compassion, and the connection of all that is through this divine center of the heart. And just as we spoke before about the torus, and that the heart chakra is a torus, a toroidal form, and just recognize that spinning, magnificent heart chakra that is reaching out into the universe, into the galaxy, connecting you to the perfection of what is available for you right here, right now, in the present. And breathe that in. Feel your heart just loving that connection, expanding with it. If you want to go out into the galaxy and reach out through your heart and take in more, bring it back in for your evolution, releasing what is up for you to release and bringing in the freshness of what is here for you now. Just breathe into that. Feel it. Love it. Feel that divine connection. Feel it spinning through you. Now notice if there's any other place in your body that wants to feel that beautiful, loving, healing energy. And expand into those places. Let the spinning toroidal energies get in and cleanse and heal those aspects. Any areas of your body, any areas of your life. Let that toroidal flow do its work. Evolving, healing, cleansing, loving, expanding. Take another deep breath. And let's just again connect in with the beautiful relationship to Mother Earth. Feeling how your love is being brought to all aspects of Mother Earth, as you are also bringing to you the love of Mother Earth. Just feel that relationship perfectly connecting, healing. Breathe in. Just feel the joy. Feel the love and compassion that you have for all life on this planet. All life, including your own. For the good of all. Come back to center into your heart. And as you're breathing, notice if there are any other clarifications or messages that are special for you right now to take into your dream time, into your next days. Just notice if there's some wonderful relationship, some knowing that is coming clear to you now. Feel how you belong. And how those connections remain. And as you take another deep breath, start to just move your body a little bit. And just move any of the kinks around. And let's take this knowledge and this energy and this refreshment into your life in all the ways that are appropriate for you in your presence. And just now focus on gratitude. Accepting the gifts, accepting gratitude, accepting all that you are in love and in joy. Take another breath and start to come back into present consciousness in your room, in your body, where you are now.
And so it is. That was beautiful, Gail. That was wonderful, Gail. Good job.
Thank you.
You can really feel the love of this group. I think it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It just leads to that whole feeling of gratitude. I'm so thankful for everyone that joins us here week after week. Mm-hmm. And I did want to mention for those coming in late that you guys create these forms. So if anybody's in the Lyons, Colorado area, they could actually come into a store or a local store you have there. But you also have a website, which we do have that link below in the description. So you can look through their different forms that they offer on the website and order directly from there. It's really cool.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. Thank you for this opportunity to connect in with all of these wonderful, wonderful beings and with the two of you as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming here with our group, because our group here they're here every Saturday night and they're giving their hearts to Earth, to particular topics: healing, clearing, cleaning, loving.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Blessings.
Blessings, and thank you all so much. We're
Very
doing
nice.
it together.
Yeah, we're doing it together, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'd love to have you guys back in the future sometime. It's always an enlightening conversation. Mm-hmm. I love the topics that we discussed, and there's always more to discuss about them. You know, it's just the way everything's all connected. So I do appreciate you providing that slideshow and helping connect all of these dots. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Thank you.
Can't wait to have you back.
Glad it worked.
Yeah. We know it was a little challenging.
But it worked, and thank you guys for sticking with us. They don't care anyway. They just chat it up until we get in here anyway. They love each other, so it's a beautiful thing. No sweat. And it was a 2-hour show. It sure didn't seem like 2 hours. But
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's our longest show, Shane. I think we've topped ourselves now.
Yeah, it went quick, though. I looked down, I was like, oh, gosh, I guess we better get to the meditation. Well, lots of love to everybody in the chat. And thank you, too, for coming on. And thank you, Eileen, for inviting them and meeting them. And
thank you.
And we'll see you on the next one.
All
Have
right.
a good one.
Well, love and blessings.
God bless.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.